Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Party are really going in on Mark Carney over this recent budget disaster. We all see what's happening, the response with the Liberal Party. They're trying to really go after Pierre Poilievre because they want him gone, because they don't want to deal with him, because they know he can beat Carney. Either way, we're going to have a look at this video here from Pierre. It was this insights from Pierre Poilievre. And we're going to have a look at this. Now, before we do, please don't forget to like and subscribe, because it really does help grow the channel. And I appreciate you guys so much for doing that. So let's have a look, and then we'll talk about it.
In such an economy, it would be easy for young people to afford homes. Single mothers would walk down grocery aisles and fill their cart with the things they want their children to eat, not the things that they can afford and don't have to turn back when they get to the checkout because the prices are too high. A country like the one I've described would mean that everybody would own a home with a yard, and every single night there'd be meat and potatoes on the dinner table. Those are the practical benefits that come from having a strong economy that produces low-cost but high-quality goods. That was the promise of Canada. But that promise is now broken. Look around you. Housing costs have more than doubled in the last 10 years, rising faster than in any other G7 country. In fact, housing prices have increased about 30% faster than incomes, the biggest gap of any OECD nation. We now have an entire generation, for the first time ever, that believes they will never be able to afford a home. This has never happened before. Food bank use has more than doubled in the last 10 years. One food bank leader said that it took a century and a half to get to 1 million visits a month. And in the last 5 years, that number has more than doubled to 2.2 million. So in 5 years, we have added more monthly food bank users than we had in the previous 150 years. To show the human cost of this, today a poll came out saying 20% of Canadians are not paying their bills so that they can afford to feed their families. We have malnutrition. We have 10% of our country that told a food bank survey recently that they are skipping meals sometimes for an entire day because they can't afford to eat. This, of course, is the result of a costly government. Costly government drives up the cost of living. Now, in the last election, Mark Carney promised that he was going to be different. The Liberal Party was, see, the lights are going out because the energy prices are so high. It's,
See, the last video I made, Andrew Scheer made a really corny and cringy joke. Pierre's actually pretty funny. He's got a really good sense of humor. He's really personable. Don't tell the mainstream media that. Don't tell Liberal supporters that. They'll probably call you a Nazi or some shit. But Pierre, he's much more funny, much more charismatic. That's why he's the man for the job.
It's that industrial...
Or at least some of the reasons why.
Carbon tax again. But Mr. Carney was going to be the tight-fisted banker. He was going to be nothing like Justin Trudeau. He made so many promises. And yet, what have been the results of all these promises? First, he promised that he would negotiate a win with the Americans. By July 21st, he would have a deal. Still no win, still no deal, still no elbows, still no jobs. Here we are, after he promised that he would, quote-unquote, invest more. This week's budget showed that investment has collapsed in all 3 fiscal quarters for which he has been Prime Minister. He said he'd double home building. Now his government agency, the CMHC, says home building will drop by 13% over the next several years. And he said that he would spend less. That was one of his 2-word slogans. He was after me for having 3-word slogans. His were just 2, so he was at least more parsimonious with words. But spend less. Did you see the budget? The deficit is 100% more. He's literally doubled the deficit that Justin Trudeau left behind for this year and for the next 5 years. The deficit, as Dan pointed out, this year will be $78 billion, twice the $41 billion that Trudeau had projected, $16 billion higher than Carney promised during the election campaign. And over the next 5 years, the government expects, and this is without any new spending in any of those 4 future budgets, they expect to add $1/3 of $1 trillion of additional debt. This will be the most costly 5 years, if it is allowed to happen, in any of Canada's history. And make no mistake, this is not due to the falling revenue from the trade war. It is due to increased government spending. Mr. Carney has added $141 billion of new spending measures. These are decisions by his government to add new costs that were not budgeted before, in exchange for which he promises to find about $50 billion of savings. So even if he keeps his promise to find the savings and to contain the spending at the aforementioned levels, that will mean a net increase in costs of $90 billion, which works out to about $5,400 for every family in Canada. And let's not make any mistake. Canadians will pay for this. The government has no money. It cannot give you anything it does not take away. Every dollar the government spends comes out of the pockets of Canadians. The more they spend, the more things cost. They only have 3 ways of paying for things: with taxes, with debt, and with money printing inflation. Either way, the Canadian people get the bill. And this promise-breaking budget by Mark Carney is the single most expensive for Canadians, who will be paying the price in higher food costs, higher home prices, and other increases in their cost of living. So today I'd like to present you with the contrasting vision that the Liberals and the Conservatives have on our economy. Let's start with costs and with the fiscal well-being of our people. So we all agree, everyone agrees, that life is too expensive in Canada today. Housing is the most expensive in the G7, for example. Food prices now are prohibitive, to the point where people are at food banks. So the question is, how do we make things more affordable? Well, our approach is to address the core problem, which is the government itself. When government runs massive deficits and prints money to pay for it, the resulting increase in the monetary mass bids up the cost of everything you buy. If you have an economy with, say, 10 apples and $10, it's $1 an apple. If you double the dollars to 20, and you still only have 10 apples, you're not twice as rich. It's just that each apple costs twice as much. The money supply has grown from about $1.8 trillion to $2.6 trillion in the last 5 years. That's a 40% increase in the money supply, during which time the economy grew by roughly 4 or 5%. So when you grow the money supply 10 times faster than the stuff that money buys, prices get bid up and everything costs more. Compounding that is the industrial carbon tax, numerous other hidden taxes, high income tax, and the cost of government is driving up the cost of living. Mr. Carney's solution to that problem is to create a whole bunch of new government programs to redistribute back money that he ultimately took away from families. Well, why not just reverse the damage the government did in the first place? Why not bring down the deficit by cutting bureaucracy, consultants, foreign aid, corporate welfare, handouts to fake and fraudulent asylum claimants, and other the money that the $26 billion that we spend on consultants? We could cut that back to the levels that it was at just 10 years ago, bringing down the cost of government. Why not bring in the dollar for dollar law, a very simple rule that you follow in your businesses and that seniors, single moms, and small businesses all follow, which is that every time you bring in a new dollar of spending, the government and its ministers should be obliged by law to find an equal dollar of savings.
Absolutely.
That would require politicians go into the line items of the departments to dig out the waste, optimize spending, and achieve value for money. By bringing down the deficits, we would no longer have to print the cash, and we could reduce the burden on the Canadian people that inflation has inflicted. That is...
Okay, I'm going to cut it off right there. I know this is a pretty long speech. I didn't want to let it go for too long, but you get what he's saying, right? And again, this is why the Liberal Party wants him gone. They know he makes sense. You saw the sense of humor, the personality, the charisma, the fact that he's intelligent and very personable, and people who meet him tend to like him. That's why they push so many hit pieces out against him. That's why they make him seem like he's Donald Trump, because they want people to not like him. There's a reason they didn't do that to Andrew Scheer, because they knew they were going to beat Andrew Scheer. People weren't turned on to what Trudeau really was back then. Aaron O'Toole was basically another liberal. They knew they were going to beat Aaron O'Toole. There were no dirty tricks. But then they saw what Pierre Poilievre was about to do to Trudeau, and all of a sudden they had to bring out the magic bag and throw all kinds of tricks and special things in the way for the shiny things for Canadians to go, oh, look at this guy, on top of the trade war. Canadians usually don't want to change governments too much. Obviously the leader was changed, but they didn't want to vote for a different party because they just felt like Mark Carney was the guy. Well, look at his resume and the mainstream media glazing over him, the NDP crashing out, Trump. It took a lot to beat him. You going to have that same opportunity again in the next election? Well, they would if we had one now. But if we wait just a little bit longer, people are going to be less and less fearful of Trump. That's going to die down one day. The NDP is going to get some support back, and then what do the Liberals do? Pull another Hail Mary and switch Carney out for a new leader? They don't have anybody else. Pierre Poilievre, you can go back to some of his videos from years ago. He was telling everyone Mark Carney is going to replace Justin Trudeau, and he was 100% right. He knew he was never going to go to an election against Trudeau with Jagmeet Singh propping him up. But Jagmeet's gone. The NDP is going to get some support back. Heather McPherson, she's a female. She's going to get some of that female vote. And it's going to come a lot from Mark Carney. That support's going to take maybe 4 to 5 points, at least, off of Mark Carney's support. Well, if you believe Abacus data and that Pierre Poilievre is right now currently 2 points ahead, which is in the margin of error, take those 5 points away from Mark Carney, now he's 7 points up. That's majority territory. That's what we need. Pierre is the man for the job. He is absolutely the person we need to be the prime minister. We don't have anyone else. Even if you don't like Pierre, vote in Maxime Bernier, who can't win a seat. I mean, good Lord, man. I've had enough of this. Some conservatives are even turning on Pierre. It's a big mistake. Getting rid of Pierre Poilievre for anybody else. There are other people I like. But getting rid of Pierre Poilievre for anyone else would be a gigantic mistake. He can beat Mark Carney. Just watch.